Let's cook around the world! Together we'll travel the world one recipe at a time. And today's recipe comes from France, and it is French onion soup. The history of this dish can be traced back to the Roman times, but it became popular in the 17th century thanks to King Louis XV. There are two conflicting stories on how the soup was invented, and they both involve the king. The first claims the soup was invented by the king during a hunting trip, and the other claims it was popularized by Duke Leczinski, the father of the Queen of France, who was served the soup at his hotel and loved it so much he insisted the chef teach him the recipe. And later he cooked the dish for his daughter and son-in-law, the King and Queen of France. Whatever the truth of its origin, the simple fact is that this simple yet decadent soup is enjoyed the world over and from people of all walks of life. So let me show you how to make this delicious soup step by step. And as always, a full list of all the ingredients and quantities are shown at the end of this video, as well as the description box below. In a large pot or pan, melt the butter and olive oil over a low-medium heat. Add the onions. Unlike me, try to get all yours in the pan. The key to a good French onion soup is threefold. First is to caramelize the onions. To achieve this, we will use large, thinly sliced yellow onions. Make sure you slice them evenly so they all cook at the same time. We're now going to cover the pan and cook for around 10 minutes to allow the steam to build up. This allows the onions to get slightly soft before we begin to caramelize them, otherwise we'll just have burnt raw onions. Keep an eye on them and stir occasionally to stop them sticking to the pan. After 10 minutes, remove the lid, and now we can start the process of browning and caramelizing the onions. We will cook the onions low and slow. Avoid browning them too fast as they will burn and become bitter. This step is crucial as it gives the soup its unique flavor. Keep stirring on occasions so they cook evenly and don't burn or stick to the bottom of the pan. The longer you cook the onions, the more sugar they release. As this is a soup and not a dessert, we're only going to cook them for around an hour. I know this sounds like a long time, but it's well worth the time and effort, and believe me, you won't regret this. Once the onions are deep golden brown and look like this, we're ready to add the cider and deglaze the pan. I'm using a dry cider for this recipe, as the other types make the final soup too sweet. Dry vermouth also works very well with this recipe, and if you don't drink alcohol, then you can substitute this with unsweetened apple juice. Once most of the cider has evaporated, we're going to add the garlic. Garlic adds a great flavour to the soup and should always be added after the onions have caramelized. Finely minced garlic works the best as it allows it to cook evenly. Once the aroma of the garlic starts to fill the kitchen, which should only take a minute or two, it's time to add the flour. We'll cook this for a few minutes to cook out the rawness of the flour. The second key ingredient to a good French onion soup is the broth. We're going to add this in gradually to avoid getting any lumps. Beef broth is the traditional choice, but you could also use chicken or lamb, and if you prefer a vegetarian version, then you could either use a vegetable or mushroom broth instead. Whichever one you choose, try to get the best one you can find. Obviously homemade is the best, but these days there's some really good ones available from most supermarkets, so there's no real need to make your own unless of course you really want to. Add the balsamic vinegar, the bay leaf and thyme. Salt and pepper to taste, but be careful not to add too much as the cheese will also add to the saltiness of the soup. We can always add more when we do the final taste test. Bring the soup to a simmer and let it cook for around 20 minutes. This will allow the flavours to melt together and the broth to reduce and thicken slightly. Make sure the soup is simmering and not boiling, as we don't want to reduce it too much. What would French onion soup be without croutons? Just onion soup, right? And of course we're going to use a French baguette sliced into half-inch slices. Place them on a tray and we're going to coat them lightly with butter and then toast them under the grill until light golden brown. In an oven-proof bowl, add a slice of pre-toasted bread to the bottom and ladle the soup on top. And now top with a further 2 slices of toasted baguettes or more if your bowl allows. The third key ingredient is the cheese. The traditional recipe calls for a Gruyere, and that's what I'm using today, but if you can't get hold of this, then cheddar cheese is a good alternative. Make sure you add a good handful to each bowl, as this gives an added depth of flavour to an already amazing soup. Place the bowl on a baking tray and put it under a grill for around 2 to 3 minutes or until the cheese is melted and is bubbling, but keep an eye on your soup to make sure the cheese doesn't burn. And when it looks like this, your classic French onion soup is done. Right now the soup with the melted cheese is hotter than the surface of the sun, so let it cool for a couple of minutes before serving. The last thing you want is 3rd-degree burns to your mouth. I obviously speak from experience. I make the mistakes, so you don't have to. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Please don't forget to subscribe for more recipes and cooking videos. And as my friends say in France, bon appétit!